After getting the green light from his wife, Terakul sat down with his younger brother Nazmul the night after college. He couldn't wait to share his wild idea. It was one of those thoughts that sounded insane, something his brother had never even considered. But Terakul kept pushing, saying that Uzma was already on board, so all that was left to do was make it happen. The only catch: it had to be kept secret from their sister, Afsana. Of course, Nazmul was shocked. It was the kind of thing that didn't just get tossed around lightly, but Terakul was persistent. Hey there, welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into another chilling true story from this world, one that's sure to make your jaw drop. This time, our tale comes from Bogra city in the Rajshahi division of northern Bangladesh. It's about a family that once had the entire neighborhood in awe, wealthy, respected, seemingly perfect. But everything took a dark turn when the community discovered the shocking, unnatural behavior of a brother-in-law with his own biological brother's wife. What really went down in this crazy case? Let's break it down and talk about it in more detail. You won't want to miss this one. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this with your friends. Now, let's jump right in. So, here's how the story goes. A man named Terakul was born in 1990 in the town of Bogra, in the Rajshahi division of northern Bangladesh. For those who might not be familiar, Bogra is a small but vibrant city known for its agricultural roots. The area's economy is largely driven by farming. Rice, wheat, corn, and vegetables are the main crops. There's also a thriving food processing industry, textiles, and handicrafts that support the local economy. Terakul's parents are no longer with him. He lives in the house they left behind with his two younger siblings. The house might not be large, but they've been pretty fortunate. His father left behind a fair amount of farmland, which is managed with the help of day laborers. Terakul's older sibling, Nazmul, is still studying business management. He's a good, obedient young man who looks up to Terakul, especially since, after their father passed, Terakul has taken on the role of head of the family. Then there's his younger sister, Afsana. She's still in high school in the city, but she's a hard-working girl who not only attends school but also takes care of the home. She's the one who cooks for her brothers and keeps the house clean. It's clear that Terakul is a simple guy, diligent, responsible, and committed to looking after his siblings for as long as he can. When it comes to his education, Terakul is just as serious. While working toward his undergraduate degree, he met a beautiful woman named Uzma. The two hit it off right away. They graduated together, and everything just seemed to fall into place. Before long, they started dating. Now, Terakul is like any other guy in many ways, but he does have a health issue that's a bit of a challenge. When he was a teenager, he was involved in a serious accident that left him needing weeks of treatment. The effects of that injury have lingered, especially when it comes to his fertility. The doctors said it's not impossible for him to have kids, but he needs to stay on top of recovery therapy and follow some dietary restrictions. Despite his situation, Terakul was upfront with Uzma about his condition. And surprisingly, she didn't seem too bothered by it. They got married in December 2019, both 29 years old, and their future together seemed bright. After the wedding, Uzma moved in with Terakul and his two younger sisters in their family home. Terakul wasn't the type to just sit around, relying on the money from his father's farm. He wanted to do more, so he started a handicraft business, hoping to empower the local community. His business wasn't too far from home, only about 10 kilometers away. Terakul also wanted his wife, Uzma, to be around more, especially when he had to travel, so she left her job as a customer service rep at a car dealership to stay home and help out. But this decision would mark the start of some serious tension between Uzma and her sister-in-law, Afsana. According to neighbors, things started to get rocky just a few weeks after the wedding. There were constant arguments between Uzma and Afsana, with voices raised, insults being thrown. It didn't take long for Afsana to develop a deep dislike for Uzma. She accused Uzma of being a gold digger, claiming she was only after Terakul's money and trying to control the inheritance from their late parents. Afsana even said that Uzma only agreed to marry Terakul because she knew he couldn't have kids, which was a huge blow to Terakul's pride. But it wasn't just about money. Afsana also criticized Uzma's housekeeping skills. She'd call her lazy, accusing her of not washing clothes properly and being too neglectful when it came to cleaning the house. Uzma, on the other hand, thought Afsana was a bit of a cleanliness fanatic. Every time she finished sweeping, Afsana would come behind her, redo the work, and complain that it wasn't done right. In the beginning, Uzma tried to brush it off and confided in Terakul, but as time went on, she started to stand up for herself. The tension was building, and Terakul was caught in the middle, unsure of who to support. Things escalated when Uzma had enough and ran away to her parents' house. Terakul went after her, telling her to be patient and learn to tolerate Afsana, especially since she was still young and had some childish tendencies. At one point, Uzma even suggested they move out and live separately from Afsana, but Terakul didn't think it was the right move. He explained that their father had always emphasized the importance of looking after his younger siblings, and that it was his duty to care for them, at least for now. Despite Terakul's attempts to mediate, the tension only grew. The quarrels between Uzma and Afsana were becoming unbearable. Afsana would often gossip with the neighbors, calling Uzma ungrateful and impossible to live with, while Uzma would turn to her own circle, venting about how Afsana was like a troublemaker, always looking for a reason to cause drama. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control, with both women only growing more resentful of each other. 4 months into their marriage, Uzma and Terakul had yet to conceive, and during a routine checkup for a pregnancy program, the doctor delivered some tough news. The doctor said it would be difficult for Uzma to get pregnant, especially since Terakul hadn't made any progress with his fertility. They'd already visited 5 different doctors and tried various therapies, but nothing seemed to work. That's when a strange and unexpected idea crossed Terakul's mind, one that would change everything. In an effort to solve the issue, Terakul made a shocking suggestion. He asked his younger brother, Nazmul, to sleep with Uzma so she could get pregnant. Naturally, Uzma was taken aback by this and didn't know how to react. They spent the next few days discussing the proposal. Finally, after much back and forth and after getting his wife's reluctant approval, Terakul decided to bring up the idea to Nazmul. One evening, after Nazmul had finished his classes, Terakul spoke to him about his crazy plan. He asked his brother if he would be willing to impregnate Uzma. Nazmul was stunned, never having imagined such a thing, but Terakul pleaded with him, saying that Uzma was willing, and all they needed to do was go ahead with it. The catch was that it had to remain a secret, especially from Afsana, their younger sister. The last thing they wanted was for Afsana to find out and stir up a big mess. Nazmul wasn't thrilled about the whole idea, but after some convincing, they all agreed to keep it between the 3 of them. Fast forward to April 2019. One afternoon, Afsana, returning from the market, noticed Uzma leaving Nazmul's room. Afsana immediately questioned her. "What were you doing in my brother's room?" Uzma quickly answered, "I was just delivering the milk that Nazmul ordered earlier." Nazmul was sitting on the bed in his room at the time, and although Afsana was suspicious, she brushed the thought off and tried not to overthink it. But these little interactions started to add up. For example, one night, Afsana saw Terakul watching TV in the living room until the early hours, while Nazmul came out of his room with Uzma. When Afsana tried to confront him, Terakul quickly stepped in, preventing her from saying anything and ushering Nazmul back into the room. Afsana couldn't help but start to connect the dots. All these strange events were beginning to get under her skin, and the suspicions in her mind were starting to grow. At one point, Afsana decided to confide in her neighbor. She shared her suspicions about her sister-in-law, Uzma, who was often seen either with or coming out of Nazmul's room. What really confused her was that, during many of these moments, Terakul was around too. Afsana couldn't understand how her husband didn't notice anything strange or how he didn't seem to care. But the neighbor dismissed Afsana's concerns, suggesting that maybe she was seeing things wrong or that her vision was getting worse and she needed glasses. The comment made Afsana second-guess herself, but deep down, she still felt something was off. Then, in August 2019, Terakul and Uzma made an announcement that they were expecting a baby. Uzma was 3 months pregnant. This news brought joy to everyone, including Afsana, who couldn't help but think, wow, my brother actually turned out to be fertile after all. But she still had her doubts, so she decided to visit Terekel's regular doctor to ask about his fertility. The doctor confirmed that Terekel's condition hadn't changed, but if Uzma had really gotten pregnant, then it was a miracle. The doctor assured Afsana that nothing is impossible when it comes to what the Creator wills. But that only strengthened Afsana's belief that something wasn't right. She started to feel more certain that there had been some kind of secret relationship between Uzma and Nazmul. Her suspicions seemed to be confirmed. So she finally confronted Terekel and bluntly said she believed his wife had an affair with Nazmul, and that the baby Uzma was carrying was actually Nazmul's. Terekel quickly dismissed her claims, saying she was overreacting. Nazmul also denied it, claiming Afsana was just imagining things. Without any concrete proof, Afsana had no choice but to back off, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the days went on, Afsana would sometimes quietly confront Uzma, accusing her of being involved with Nazmul. But each time, Uzma denied it, and Nazmul stayed quiet, hiding in his room. Afsana, desperate for answers, started sneaking around at night with her phone, trying to catch them in the act. She was determined to get pictures or recordings that would prove her suspicions. But no matter how hard she tried, nothing ever happened. Uzma's pregnancy seemed to put a halt to everything, and life in the house returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be. Afsana continued her search, though. She noticed that Terekel and Nazmul seemed to be having hushed conversations behind closed doors. One day, she decided to snoop through her brother's phone and found an old message from Terekel's number. The message seemed to be a strange coded note, which made Afsana suspicious that it was actually from Nazmul, but sent from her brother's phone. Afsana was torn. She loved her brother deeply and couldn't stand the thought of him being betrayed, but she also wanted to expose what she believed was happening. The trouble was, she didn't have enough evidence to convince Terekel, and the whole thing was getting more complicated by the day. In mid-September 2019, Nazmul was involved in a serious motorcycle accident on his way home from campus. He was rushed to the hospital for treatment, leaving Afsana distraught and frequently visiting him. One Sunday afternoon in late September, Uzma was home alone, 5 months pregnant, while Terekel was away at his business. Afsana returned from visiting Nazmul at the hospital, arriving around 2 p.m. Trying to be a thoughtful sister-in-law, Uzma asked how Nazmul was doing. But instead of a warm response, Afsana exploded in anger. She snapped at Uzma, saying she had no right to ask, that she shouldn't interfere, and that her concern wasn't wanted. Her words were sharp and hurtful. The tension escalated when Afsana began throwing unwashed dishes from the kitchen, shouting accusations that echoed throughout the house. The noise was so loud that neighbors began to notice the commotion. Concerned, they knocked on the family's door, but no one answered. Growing more worried, they called the neighborhood head for help, but still no response came from inside. In a last-ditch effort, someone called Terekel, but he didn't answer either. Finally, they contacted Nazmul at the hospital, who immediately reached out to his brother. When Terekel finally picked up, Nazmul urged him to check on the house right away, explaining that the neighbors reported something serious happening. Terekel rushed home and arrived around 5 p.m. As he banged on the front door, there was nothing but silence inside. The earlier chaos was replaced by an eerie stillness. Realizing something was wrong, Terekel ran to the back of the house, where the window didn't have iron bars, and forced it open to climb inside. What he saw sent chills down his spine. Afsana was lying motionless on the floor. Panicking, Terekel checked on her and quickly realized she wasn't breathing. Desperate, he searched for Uzma and found her trembling, curled up in the wardrobe. He immediately called the authorities. While they were on their way, Uzma, still shaking, began to tell him what happened. Through tears, Uzma claimed that a group of large men had broken into the house. She said Afsana had tried to fight them off, which only enraged them further, leading them to attack her. Hearing this, Terekel screamed and broke down in tears, devastated by the horror of it all. But before the police arrived, Uzma confessed to her husband. She admitted that everything was her doing. Sobbing, she apologized and said she deeply regretted her actions. Terakul, now overwhelmed with shock and heartbreak, could barely process what he had just heard. Moments later, the police arrived, and the nightmare truly began. This was a devastating blow for Terakul and his younger brother, Nazmul. They had once hoped Uzma could help care for and guide their younger sister Afsana, but instead, she had taken her life. While they knew this wasn't entirely Uzma's fault, they were well aware that Afsana had disliked Uzma from the beginning. Even during their courtship, the two clashed often. Family outings usually ended in arguments, and Terakul had naively hoped that marriage would smooth things over. Instead, things escalated. The fights between Uzma and Afsana became more frequent, and even physical at times. Neighbors even recalled seeing Afsana throw smelly, wet socks at Uzma after coming home from school, seemingly without any provocation. To investigators, Uzma shared her side of the story about that fateful day. She said that Afsana returned from the hospital in an even more volatile mood. Afsana threw dirty dishes and pans at her, hitting Uzma's face. Then, she swung a gallon of water at Uzma's shoulder before grabbing an iron rod from the kitchen and attacking her, striking both her head and her pregnant belly. Uzma, feeling cornered and desperate to protect her unborn child, fought back. In the chaos, she managed to grab the iron rod from Afsana and retaliated. Overcome with rage, Uzma struck Afsana repeatedly, losing control until her sister-in-law was lifeless on the floor. Terakul and Nazmul shared their family's troubled dynamics with investigators, including the strained relationship between Uzma and Afsana, as well as the bizarre arrangement involving Nazmul and Uzma. News of these revelations shocked their community, and neighbors openly criticized the siblings. Terakul's extreme desire for a child had set off a chain of events that spiraled into tragedy. In the aftermath, no charges were brought against Terakul or Nazmul, but Uzma faced legal consequences. Despite expressing remorse and apologizing for her actions, she was jailed. Because she was pregnant at the time, her trial was postponed until after she gave birth to her baby in late February 2020. The authorities provided assistance during her labor and ensured the baby's welfare. Terakul was granted custody of the child, while Uzma was placed in a special prison where she could continue breastfeeding her baby. Eventually, the Bogra City Court sentenced Uzma to a maximum of 15 years in prison for the assault that led to Afsana's death. Meanwhile, Terakul and Nazmul resumed their lives at home, grappling with the aftermath of the tragedy and the weight of their decisions. What lessons can we learn from this story?